Well, we are here in Detroit for Business Leaders for Michigan's CEO Summit. It is an annual event. Over 400 leaders get together to exchange ideas and get a sense of where Michigan is headed when it comes to attracting industry and educating our workforce, as well as finding opportunities for growth and making improvements. This is a group of powerful statewide leaders who also have the ability to affect change with Lansing's agenda. And joining us back on MiWeek is Doug Rothwell. He is the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. Doug, welcome back. It's always good to see you on MiWeek.
Yeah, good to see all you guys.
All right, and you've got over 400 people here at the Weston Book
Hotel. It's amazing, isn't
it? Annual event. So I always kind of wonder, what have some of these most powerful leaders in the state been talking to you about when it comes to Michigan over the past year?
Well, you know, I think a lot of it's they're feeling so good about how we've come back. I mean, it's a heck of a lot different than it was the first time we did this about 6 or 7 years ago. But at the same time, they want to know, how do we keep it going moving forward? And I think, you know, Detroit's a great example of that. I mean, look at the progress that's been made in a short period of time, but I don't think anybody's satisfied with where we are.
So what are what's the prime indicator for you and some of the business leaders when they say, aha, we're on the right path?
Well, I mean, look, jobs is a big deal, right? I mean, the fact that there's all these help wanted signs everywhere and employers are complaining about not being able to find people for work, I mean, that's a great problem to have. But, you know, we're worried about the income levels because, you know, as long as the income levels aren't moving up to the degree they should be, and we're still about $10,000 short per person, compared to top 10 states, I mean, people aren't going to ever feel as good as we'd like them to feel about their futures.
Yeah. Doug, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Doug, you all at Business Leaders did a lot of work on reform of the tax policy, regulatory policy, to create a better business environment in Michigan. But we know this all went through the political process, and that's always vulnerable to the next administration or an administration change. What are you doing to protect the gains you've made under the administration of Governor Rick Snyder?
Well, really two things, Nolan. First of all, we're trying to codify in law anything that's a practice, but it's not in legislation today. And the other is to make sure.
An example?
Well, I mean, for example, 2-year budgeting. Okay. I mean, that's a simple process, but it's not in law. It's not required. They get rid of that tomorrow if they want to. The other would be, though, is making sure the candidates that are running for office understand that the idea here is let's not throw away everything and start all over again. I mean, Michigan's problem has been this inconsistency. Every time a governor changes, we kind of like reboot the whole process. We can't afford for that to happen. Let's build on the progress that we've made.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, we have serious problems still with revenues and with outcomes in terms of government services. Education is not keeping pace with other states, and we have this huge shortfall still each year in the budget. What are the things we need to do other than cutting taxes to make sure that we get the outcomes we want in Michigan?
You know, actually, this morning in the talk that I gave, I said I think that what people ought to do is look at the candidates not for what they say about just cutting taxes or just spending more money or just trying to grow one industry to kind of lift Michigan up. It's really about all of those things. And unless you find candidates that understand how the economy works well enough to understand that it's not, there's no one silver bullet, you got to do all these things to compete, that we're never going to get to where we need to be.
Doug, you said earlier that we've got this good problem to have of having some jobs, but people not there to be able to fill them, or not educated enough or skilled workers enough to fill them. How do we change that? And how is Business Leaders from Michigan going to, maybe in the next year or so, kind of take up that mantle to change that? Yeah,
I mean, really it's growth begets growth. I mean, what I said is that people really want to be in places that are growing because there's more jobs available, there's more opportunity available, but the way you get there is you got to have the education and training system to produce the talent that's needed by those jobs that are going to be created. You need to have the infrastructure to connect us to this global economy that we're in, and you got to be able to have, you know, some sectors of the economy that are outperforming others. We've got a couple, but we just need to have some more. So it's really creating that dynamism that you're looking for. That's what will attract more people to come here.
Doug, when you look at that $10,000 gap in household income between Michigan and the top 10 states, that's a lot of money that go a long way to paying a college tuition, for example. What do we need to do to close that? I mean, what is the secret formula for closing that gap?
More better jobs. I mean, simply put, and that means that, again, sounds like, you know, a similar refrain, but you've got to have people that have more education and training that warrant those higher wage jobs. You've got to have sectors of the economy that are on the growth end of the new economy that are able to afford to create jobs like that. And you've got to have the infrastructure to connect you in this global economy. The example I gave today is I said, look, you know, we're on this North American trade corridor. Doesn't do any good to be on that corridor if we don't have the infrastructure to take advantage of it.
in Detroit, we just had a mayoral election. The sort of narrative that framed it was this idea of two Detroits, one doing much better than it used to be, the other still waiting to see the benefits. I'm always curious what the business community thinks about that, given that they drive so much of the recovery in downtown and midtown Detroit, big businesses and small. What do they think about what's going on in the neighborhoods, and what role can we get them to play?
I think it's an extension of what we just talked about with income, Stephen. I mean, we are not going to be successful if all we're going to do is evaluate our success just by the sheer number of jobs we're creating, or if just downtown is a successful place. It's got to be a community that everyone benefits in this recovery. And so when I talk to our members all the time, that's what they actually want to focus on. They want to focus on incomes. They want to focus on places in Michigan that are not feeling the recovery. We don't have to worry about downtown so much anymore. We don't need to worry so much about the high end of the economy. It's where's everybody else fitting in.
So we're making this bid for Amazon to come to Detroit, which would of course change everything. But let's say we don't get that. Are there other businesses in the state that we might attract to say, hey, come to Detroit, come to a neighborhood in Detroit and make a big difference? I mean, is that conversation happening in the business community?
I think you're actually seeing some of it already. I mean, if I look at some of the neighborhoods like in Delray, or you look down on Fort Street, you look at some of the investment that's happening kind of outside the immediate downtown, midtown area, I think it's amazing what's happened in a very short period of time. But I'd really like to see more companies coming in from out of state too. I mean, it's a little early yet, but we need to get there.
Hey Doug, last week I was moderating a group of superintendents in Oakland County and talking about the state of K-12 education in Michigan. And the constant refrain I was hearing is, well, we need the business leaders of Michigan to get involved in how we're going to improve K-12 and maybe starting to push where some of the money should come from. What do you think about that and the role the business community should be playing in the next 3 to 5 years about what's happening with education?
Well, I think you're going to see, our organization, for one, take a larger role in this space. But I think at the same time, we've got to be mindful that we're not education experts. I mean, I think we understand the product we're getting from the education system, the product that we need from the education system. But, I also don't want to put ourselves in the role of saying, well, we know, exactly how the curriculum ought to be delivered. I mean, that's not who we are. But I think you are going to see the business community take a larger role, focusing on why is it that we have a gap between us and where these better states are performing, and what do we need to do to close that gap, and really then holding our education leaders responsible for what's the best way to get there.
Doug, Steve mentioned the Amazon bid. Your members and your organization was active in putting that bid together. What did we learn about our strengths and our weaknesses through that process?
Well, I think, first of all, we found that, we're very well located to be able to attract it. We've got this great international airport. We've got a great, as I mentioned, geographic location. We've got a workforce that, while, we would like to see it better, the fact is that we still have a lot of great skills and expertise here that we can utilize. But, there are some downsides. I mean, infrastructure, mass transit, connectability isn't where it should be. Education and training, we've got some niches like engineering that we're very good at, but we've got a lot of areas that we're not so good at, that we talked about the need for K-12 reform. So I think that we are competitive to make that bid. Certainly we weren't 5 years ago. We are today, but I wish we were 5 years from now.
You talked about investing in infrastructure and investing in these other things. That usually translates to taxes, more taxes. But your organization is not necessarily anti-tax, but you're not in favor of broad taxes. How would you pay for these things?
Well, we right now are spending hundreds of millions of dollars from the state general fund on infrastructure that we shouldn't be. If we were to raise infrastructure taxes on gasoline or on water to the level that we should, we would be able to not only have the infrastructure we need, we'd be able to free up that money that could then go into education and training and other areas that we need it. So I think that one area, infrastructure taxation, is really the solution for a much broader revenue issue.
As we kind of wrap things up here, Doug, you talk about where we were 5 years ago and where we kind of need to be 5 years from now. When you leave a day like today, when you have business leaders from around the state meeting here, what is kind of the call to action or the marching plan, or where you see moving forward in the next year?
The biggest thing we're trying to get people to take away from today, Christy, is not so much what the state needs to do more of, but what every organization in the state can be contributing to it. If they are stronger, if they're listening to these best practices that they're hearing from these business leaders from around Michigan, around the world for that matter, then they're going to make the state stronger as a byproduct. And it takes both to make Michigan to be a top 10 state.
Well, it's always good to have you join us, Doug. Doug Rothwell, the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan.